In 1991, Michael Jackson walked away from the legendary Quincy Jones and gambled everything on a radical new sound with Teddy Riley, injecting New Jack Swing, risking his reign as pop's king, and triggering controversy with Black or White. What forced this creative detour, and why did it matter more than any of his record-breaking albums before? Teddy Riley arrived in the studio with a toolkit built for groove. At the center sat the Akai MPC-60, a drum machine and sampler that let him sculpt rhythm with mathematical precision. Instead of the straight, mechanical beats that powered the 1980s pop scene, Riley programs swung 16th notes, nudging every other hit just enough to pull the groove off center. This was not random. Fan analyses estimate the swing on tracks like Jam at around 40%, a subtle but unmistakable lurch that made the drums feel more human, more urgent. Layered on top, Riley stacked his own hand-played samples, snaps, claps, and fragments of percussion, feeding them through the MPC and tweaking each for punch. But the machines alone did not define the sound. Riley insisted on running these digital patterns through vintage analog consoles, like the SSL and Reed's boards at Larrabee Studios. These desks, prized for their warmth and punch, added a kind of grit that digital mixers of the era could not match. Tracks started as sketches on an Akai 12-track recorder, then Riley would transfer the best bits directly, keeping the raw edges intact. He avoided stock drum machine sounds, choosing instead to sample himself or twist everyday noises into new textures. Car horns, glass, even his own voice, all bent to fit the pulse of New Jack Swing. The result was a rhythmic blueprint that felt both calculated and alive. Every layer, each swung snare, every sampled accent was chosen to push Jackson's music into a future where hip-hop's bounce and R&B's richness live side by side. Riley once said, "For Dangerous, I brought R&B back." Harder, hip-hop influenced grooves. That groove started with the math of swing, but it came alive through the heat of analog gear and the intuition of a producer who treated every sound as a signature. Pressing play on 2 decades of pop, the contrast becomes undeniable. Cue up Billie Jean, and the pulse is locked. Every drum hit lands exactly on time, machine straight, with no swing or shuffle. The Lin LM1 drum machine drives the groove, each snare and kick perfectly spaced, a grid of sound that defined the 1980s. Now jump ahead to Jam. The first seconds hit different. The drums, programmed on Teddy Riley's Akai MPC-60, don't just keep time, they bend it. Fan breakdowns estimate the swing at about 40%, a subtle lurch that pulls the hi-hats and snares off the rigid grid. It's a groove that feels alive, unpredictable, almost like it's breathing. Imagine the MIDI grid side by side. On the left, Billie Jean shows even blocks, each transient perfectly aligned. On the right, Jam reveals staggered markers, some hits nudged forward, others pulled back. This isn't just a technical tweak, it's a total rethink of how pop could move. The swing isn't accidental, it's programmed, measured, and then sculpted by hand. Riley's process wasn't about chasing perfection, but about chasing feel. Over 28 months in the studio, Jackson and Riley listened, adjusted, and replayed each groove until the drums made you want to move. That difference between the straight lines of the past and the swung, layered future set the stage for everything that followed on Dangerous. The sound wasn't just new for Michael Jackson, it was new for pop itself, and you could hear it from the very first beat. On November 14th, 1991, television screens in 27 countries lit up at once. More than 500 million people tuned in as Michael Jackson's black or white video exploded onto MTV, Fox, BET, and the BBC. The chorus hit with a jolt. Jackson's voice, backed by staccato guitar and a drum loop, declared, "It don't matter if you're black or white." This wasn't just another pop single. The message was direct, urgent, and global, landing at a moment when headlines in the United States were filled with stories of racial violence and unrest. Jackson and director John Landis didn't stop at a feel-good chorus. The video's closing minutes, the infamous Panther coda, showed Jackson alone on a darkened street, transforming into a panther, then unleashing a furious dance. He smashed windows tagged with racist slurs, clawed at the air, and let out a scream that seemed to echo the anger and exhaustion of Black Americans in 1991. Within hours, conservative critics and parent groups condemned the sequence as violent and sexually charged, demanding it be pulled from rotation. MTV and Fox scrambled. Within 72 hours, the network version was edited, the coda trimmed, and Jackson issued a statement explaining his intent, a dance-style interpretation of animalistic instincts, not a call to violence. The backlash didn't slow the song's momentum. Black or White shot to #1 in the United States for 7 weeks, the fastest chart climb since the Beatles. The video's morphing faces, people of different races blending seamlessly, became a pop culture landmark. But beneath the spectacle, Jackson had taken a risk, using his new sound, driven by Teddy Riley's sharp, swung rhythms, to put a message about race and unity front and center. For the first time, the world saw Jackson's music as a platform for confrontation, as well as celebration, and the stakes for what pop could say, and how, were raised overnight. A golden doorway opens onto ancient Egypt. Remember, the time arrives not as a history lesson, but as a spectacle. A $2 million video directed by John Singleton that reimagines Black royalty for mainstream pop. Eddie Murphy and Iman join a cast dressed in gold and turquoise, while Jackson, wrapped in linen, spins through a court where every face is black. For 4 minutes, the narrative flips. Egypt belongs to its own descendants, not Hollywood's old tropes. Singleton's direction was rare for a music video, and it drew headlines and debate, but the message was clear. As the bridge hits, layered with Teddy Riley's swung groove, the song becomes more than romance. It is a statement about image, pride, and who gets to be seen as legendary. A different kind of plea rises in Heal the World. The chorus with the line, "Make it a better place for you and for me," lands without cynicism. Jackson's voice floats over a gentle arrangement. The percussion softened, the melody simple enough for children to sing. Released at the height of early 1990s unrest, the song's message was backed by action. Jackson launched the Heal the World Foundation in 1992, tying the single directly to global charity work. The music video, filled with images of war and poverty, underlined his shift from entertainer to advocate. Critics noticed the reach. In a 1991 soundbite, one reviewer called Dangerous the first Michael Jackson album that feels like it is trying to save the world, not just rule it. These songs, one wrapped in myth and the other in hope, expand the album's purpose. Dangerous was no longer just about breaking pop records. It was about rewriting who Jackson could be and what pop could stand for. Quincy Jones had been the architect behind Michael Jackson's greatest triumphs, Thriller and Bad. By 1989, their partnership had ended. For the first time in nearly a decade, Jackson stood alone at the helm, determined to prove he could shape his own sound. He brought in new collaborators, but the weight of expectation was his to carry. Studio engineer Bruce Swedian, who worked on both eras, later recalled that Michael took more control on Dangerous than ever before. The session stretched over 2 years, with Jackson reviewing every detail, from song structure to the final mix. Without Jones's guiding hand, every decision carried more risk. Jackson was gambling not just with his music, but with his legacy, staking his reputation on the belief that he could reinvent himself and that the world would follow. Dangerous didn't just top charts, it changed what a pop album could do in the real world. The Dangerous World Tour became a global event, spanning 72 concerts and drawing more than 4 million fans. By the end, ticket sales grossed around $100 million. But Jackson didn't pocket the profits. Every dollar from the tour was pledged to charities, with much of it funneled through the Heal the World Foundation. That move set a new standard for pop stardom as a platform for philanthropy. Meanwhile, producers across the industry took notes. Dallas Austin, Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis all pointed to Dangerous as the album that made hip-hop grooves and social themes fair game for mainstream pop. The sound and the message echoed through the decade, influencing everyone from Janet Jackson to Justin Timberlake. Jackson's choices on Dangerous rippled far beyond the studio, reshaping both the business and purpose of pop music. Pop music still borrows from the blueprint that Dangerous set, melding genres, tackling global issues, and demanding reinvention. Today, Every artist betting on creative risk echoes that legacy. The sound of change never fades. It just evolves. What does that evolution look like now? Drop your thoughts below.